So a couple months ago, I saw a YouTube ad for something that pretty much stopped me dead in my tracks. Basically, it was for the service called Access Analog, where you could send your sound through a plugin in your DAW in your studio to a remote studio.
It's like a drone studio, right? It's not really a remote mixing surface. It's kind of cooler than that.
But basically, you send your audio there, and it hits real analog hardware, and there's some kind of robotics on the front of the box, and you can turn those knobs remotely through a plugin.
And you can have all the advantages of using like really big money analog equipment that's you have to maintain and stuff, but you can do it remotely as if it's like a plugin just in the DAW.
So your fingers can be, and sounds can be thousands of miles away, right? So I looked at this, I was like, holy shit, this is wild. Like, the future is weird, man.
So I decided to give it a try, and I've been using it for the last couple months on projects.
I used it on this Brain Orchestra remix that
I just put out a couple days ago, which should be on streaming on April 5th, 2021. So look out for that.
I used it on that mix. I used it on a bunch of other projects where I was mixing for other people, and I'm comfortable enough talking about it now. There's a couple things about it I really like, a couple things that kind of bug me and are probably fixable, and then
I thought it was gonna save me money, but it ended up costing me money, but it wasn't their fault. It was my own fault because I'm a little bit of a dummy, but I'll get into that next. But first, I want to give a quick demo of how this thing works, and then I'm gonna do a review overall of pros and cons at the end. So if you're here for the review, just go to the end.
Anyway, here is the Access Analog review. Okay, so let's walk you through how this works. I'm not going to show you some of the specific setup stuff because it's all pretty covered on their website, but we're working with a track that's an old remix of mine from my friend Fulmer. He's an artist based out of Australia. I did this remix for him a while ago, and this is the pre-mastered version of it, so just to give us some headroom. So anyway, this is what it sounds like on its own. Why am I getting audio? There we go. Ah. All right, so you get the idea. It's kind of like a weird, trippy electronica thing, right? So, what we're gonna do is I could actually probably bring the gain up a little bit on this, right? And so step one with Access Analog is you have to download their plugin, which is called Analog Matrix, and you have to set up an account with them. You have to buy some credits to use the equipment. That's all well covered on their website. Then you just hit connect. And then we can see that I have 22 credits to use. And there's a whole like scheduling system if you want to reserve pieces of equipment. So that's cool. But also you can just log in and just see what's available, which is that's kind of what I've been doing, just because I feel like it's a better way to just try stuff, right? So as we can see, most of the gear is available except for the SSL Fusion is not. And what do we have here? The Silver Bullet is not. I have a story about this later, but we'll get to it. And then pretty much everything else is available. And if you mouse over stuff, it'll tell you like what the cost is, and then if there's any reservations coming up. Like this one that's in use now, we can see somebody has it until 2 p.m. my time. So it's another 15 minutes if I wanted to wait to use it. And then you have this little rack-looking thing where you can build your rack that you want to do. If I were to juice this up, what I'm going to go for, let's see what they got. I'm probably going to want some kind of compressor. I like this Manley Vari Mu a lot, so I'm going to put this in. Drop that in. Okay, so now we should be getting billed, and I guess it says how much time is remaining for the credit. And then let's add some kind of saturation thing. I love this Silver Bullet. Again, I have a story about it coming up. But for now, we're just using what's available. The Black Box HD2 is also very good. Okay. Oh, the other thing, real quick. you can set a buffer size here and what the transmission format is. My instinct is to always go lossless. I don't want to be sending compressed audio. That kind of defeats the purpose. But I have got, this is one like kind of bummer about this, is sometimes you do get lag issues. So you'll start to get, like the audio will just drop out or it'll get glitchy or something. So that's the only thing, and that's even with the latency already cranked way, way, way up. This is probably I haven't been able to get away with using this at lower latencies, which is kind of a bummer. But in that case, you have this offline processor, which you basically arm it, right? And you send audio into it, right? And then when you stop, you hit process. It'll process that audio that you sent out to the hardware offline, and then you can save it. This is a real lifesaver if you're hitting latency issues. You just, select your sample rate. There's some kind of batch feature, I guess, if you want to do like a bunch of things. I haven't used it. I've only used this on entire tracks, like basically on my mix bus. I haven't really messed around with using this on individual tracks yet. Just because I'm like, if I'm going to get into that, I tend to use plugins more. I guess if there was really something I wanted to juice up, if I wanted to send drums through Pultec EQs or a distressor or something, then I would do it maybe on individual stems. But I haven't really done that yet. I've only used it on full mixes, mostly because of these latency issues. Let's get into hearing some stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's cancel the batch process. I'm going to take the saturation box out. Let's start playing with this Manley compressor first. All right, so let's go slower attack time. My threshold up. A little bit more than I want to. You see, that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes it'll say underflow whenever it's giving you an issue, but try again. Oh, yeah, more latency issues. This is a bummer. This might be because of my, because I just have a lot of things going on in the computer between the screen record, but let's try. Yeah, see, it's buggy. I mean, in this situation, if I was like working on a project like on my own without all the software running, I would probably just use the offline processor. Underflow. This is a bummer. Let's see if I can just do compressed, even though this isn't what I would normally do, because this is like not great. Better. Supposedly, like I said earlier, we're controlling robotics that actually are turning the knob here. Bring the attack all the way down too. Yeah, I guess sending compressed is just working better for the stream. If you're working at home, I would go for lossless. That's what I do. If you're getting latency issues, like I said, batch processor all the way. Let's try the black box. Let's add this thing in. even, let's say I wanted to just give this a little bit more juice too. I could throw in, let's try these Pultec EQs. You're going to need 2 of them because they're mono, right? So let me just dial in some more oomph in the bass. This is maybe adding a little bit more than I want, so I would take this to 50%. Let's see. Oh, wow. Big difference. I'm also going to round some of the top off. This mix has like a bunch of noise and kind of really crunchy sounds. And I did this originally all in the box digitally, so it sounds kind of digital. Again, this is an old mix, probably at least a couple years old, so I want to see what I can do to improve it. All right, now the final thing you might be wondering is you're like, okay, this sounds good. How do I capture it? So what you would have to do is you have to record it back into the DAW, right? You have to set up a separate track. So I usually name this something like analog bounce or whatever. And then what I'll do is I'll set this to record. And then I want to set at least in Ableton. This is a little different in every DAW, but I'm going to take the output of this track and send it into this track. And then we hit record. All right, so here is a level matched comparison of the before and the after, so you can hear exactly what the analog gear did. And then after that, I'm going to go to a final review and just kind of hit the pros and cons of this. All right, so that was a demo and some examples of what this plugin can do, how to use it, what the service is all about. As far as the actual review, what I think about it, there's definitely some pros and cons that you have to consider before you start using the service. Let's start with the good stuff. So the pros, number one, is it's really cheap considering what you get. Like I said, that Manley Vari Mu compressor I was using, I think that thing is like $5,000 to buy one. So I was able to use one, get on the actual equipment for maybe around $10, just in a couple minutes of messing around on it. Then the other thing I really like about this is that there is a plugin-like workflow, because as soon as you get into actually owning analog hardware, then you have to deal with all the stuff of like patching it into things and dealing with latency issues coming out of the computer and then back in again. You also need pretty good conversion to be able to do this and not introduce new problems. So that's a big deal, just that you can open something up and have analog hardware already set up for you with the convenience of a plugin. That's really cool. And then, like I said, even though there are some latency issues with the streaming and stuff, they do have that offline processor. So you are able to have a workaround. It's not as kind of quick and snappy as I wish it was, but the solution does exist. Now, as far as the cons of this kind of thing, again, it's like latency is a problem. Sometimes waiting for that offline bounce can sometimes, it's not the same as actually having your hands on the gear when you can kind of get into a flow with things and be very in the moment and very spontaneous with stuff. So that's kind of what you lose by having this. Also, like, again, because it feels like a plugin, you use that tactile thing that happens when you're using your hands and just in the moment and turning knobs. So that's another thing to consider. Yeah, for a lot of people, though, maybe that's worth the trade-off in cost, right? Because it's a big difference in cost. Now, speaking of that angle, I have kind of a funny thing. So this is a good way to save money, I guess. I've only been using this for a couple months, but there's two ways where it might not save you money. Basically, the credits, you're going to want to use this on everything. Like, the gear sounds great, just point blank. So you're going to want to use it all over the place. And if you start doing that, it is fun to play around with it and see what it can do. So those credits do start to add up, especially if you're stacking a couple pieces of gear together in like a 2-bus style chain, because you're getting billed for each of those pieces of gear, right? So, like, you have to balance that. I try to structure my sessions in a way where I get everything kind of set up, and then I can just get in and get out, get done what I need, bounce out the tracks I want to be processed, and then I'm out, just to minimize the cost. Because, yeah, if you're on there every day for a couple hours, like, which I could easily do, that will start to add up. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is, because of what I was saying before of missing that tactile response and the latency stuff, you might fall in love with a piece of gear that they have. This is what happened to me. I was hearing about this Louder Than Liftoff Silver Bullet. One of my friends was telling me about how great it was. Then I found out about this service, and I said, oh, they have one. This looks cool. And then I start playing around with it, and I'm like, this thing sounds really good. And with that particular piece of gear, you can't take advantage of the fact that you can also use it as front end. You can use it as preamps to record into, and then you can flip a switch, and then you can send audio out of it to juice it up further, which is kind of it's a clever piece of gear. And long story short, I ended up buying one of these things. I was like, oh my God, we're really doing this? But I sold some equipment, and I was just looking at, like, can I do this? And I'm like, well, I guess I can kind of do this. Let's go for it. So that's worth its own video. I have one of those things probably being in the middle of built right now. I put the order in maybe a month ago, and they're doing a production run. So that could come back to bite you. You use all this fancy analog stuff, and then your save for list starts to grow because you're like, oh man, I would really love a real Pultec EQ or a real SSL G comp or whatever. So that's, like, I guess it's a con. Maybe, I don't know. I guess if we want to go back to another advantage of it, this is a cool way to try gear if you're trying to buy analog hardware in the future too. So you could demo some stuff out and see what you like, see what you tend to use a lot. In my case, that's what happened with the Silver Bullet thing. Is I just was like, oh, I want to use this on everything, and I want to record through it. And so anyway, that will be its own video once the thing arrives and I actually have the box in my hand. So anyway, that should about wrap it up. If you have comments, questions, leave them in the comments. I'll have links to all the music, including the Brain Orchestra remix that's more modern and more representative of what I can do now. I'll have the link to the final version of the track I was playing around with in the session today, as well as, like, all my other shit. So you know what to do. You know how YouTube works. Like and subscribe if this was helpful. If you want to see more, want to check out my music, peace.